You have mistaken noise for stability. For years, you may have believed that your inner life became difficult only when something outside you went wrong. A relationship ended, a plan failed, a familiar role disappeared. The pressure increased. The future became uncertain. You assumed that distress entered you from the world, and that peace would return when the world finally became quiet. But when the noise faded, something unexpected happened. Your thoughts became louder. Old memories returned without invitation. Feelings you believed you had outgrown began moving beneath the surface. Questions appeared that could not be answered by productivity, distraction, or reassurance. Even moments of calm started to feel unsettling, as though silence were not giving you rest, but exposing you. You may call this overthinking. You may call it loneliness, anxiety, sensitivity, or a failure to relax. Yet Carl Jung spent decades studying exactly this pattern. Jung understood that when the external world becomes quiet, the unconscious does not become quiet with it. It finally becomes audible. That is the part you may not want to admit. Your inner life is not suddenly louder because silence has damaged you. It is louder because silence has removed the competition. The world has been speaking over your psyche for years. Deadlines spoke. Expectations spoke. Other people's needs spoke. Your social identity spoke. The version of you that knew how to appear capable, agreeable, useful, or composed spoke constantly. Every task gave you something immediate to respond to, and every response allowed you to postpone a more disturbing encounter, the encounter with yourself. When activity decreases, the psychic energy that was invested in the outside world begins to withdraw. Jung called this movement introversion, not in the casual sense of being shy or socially reserved, but as a turning inward of libido, the psyche's fundamental energy. What once flowed toward achievement, adaptation, approval, and control begins moving back toward its source. This can feel like a loss of momentum. It can feel like confusion. You may notice that ordinary tasks require more effort, while apparently useless thoughts carry strange emotional force. You may become preoccupied with a conversation from 10 years ago, a dream you cannot explain, or a life choice that once seemed settled. The conscious mind experiences this as interruption. The unconscious experiences it as opportunity. A man sits alone at his kitchen table after everyone has gone to bed. His hand reaches for his phone before he has consciously decided to pick it up. He scrolls without reading, places it face down, then reaches for it again 30 seconds later. In the silence between those movements, one sentence enters his mind. I do not know why I am living this way. Nothing dramatic has happened. That is why the sentence frightens him. The quiet has not created the question. It has only made it impossible to ignore. Jung understood that consciousness is selective. You cannot remain aware of every feeling, impulse, contradiction, memory, and possibility at once. To function, you build a manageable image of who you are. You choose certain traits, values, loyalties, and explanations. You say, "This is me," and whatever does not fit that statement is pushed toward the edges. Some of it becomes shadow. The shadow is not merely your cruelty, selfishness, envy, or rage. It also contains unlived capacities. Your assertiveness may enter the shadow if you were rewarded for compliance. Your tenderness may disappear there if you learned that vulnerability invited humiliation. Your ambition may be buried if success threatened the people around you. Your need for solitude may become shameful if your identity depends on always being available. During busy periods, These rejected parts remain easier to avoid. The demands of the day reinforce the conscious personality. You know what role to play, because the world keeps handing you the script. Silence takes the script away. Without the next demand, the next conversation, the next crisis, or the next goal, the personality loses some of its external support. You are left with psychic material that has not been translated into language. It emerges first as atmosphere, restlessness, irritation, heaviness, a sense that something is unfinished, even when every practical task has been completed. What you call unease may be the unconscious refusing to remain untranslated. Your mind becomes louder when your persona loses its audience. Jung used the word persona for the social face you develop in order to participate in the world. The persona is necessary. It allows you to work, cooperate, communicate, and belong. The problem begins when you forget that it is a mask and begin treating it as your whole identity. You become the dependable one, the rational one, the successful one, the peaceful one, the person who never needs much, the person who can handle everything. Over time, the role becomes so convincing that even you stop noticing the effort required to maintain it. Then the room grows quiet. There is no one to impress, reassure, manage, or protect. Yet the body remains tense. The mind rehearses explanations for questions no one has asked. You imagine criticism in the absence of a critic. You continue performing long after the audience has left. A woman finishes a video call and closes her laptop carefully. She remains seated with the same pleasant expression for several seconds, although the screen is black. Then her shoulders drop. She looks toward the closed door as if someone might enter and whispers, "I cannot keep doing this," before immediately opening her email again. Her exhaustion is not only caused by work, it is caused by the distance between the face she presents and the life moving underneath it. Your discomfort in silence may be the strain of meeting the person who exists when performance is no longer required. The thoughts that return in quiet are often carrying unfinished emotion. You may believe that time resolves experience automatically. It does not. Time can create distance, but distance is not the same as integration. An experience becomes integrated when its emotional meaning is consciously recognized, when the loss is grieved, when the anger is admitted, when the fantasy is released, or when the lesson alters the life that follows. Without that process, memory remains active. Jung observed that emotionally charged experiences can organize themselves into complexes. A complex is not simply a bad memory. It is a cluster of images, emotions, bodily reactions, beliefs, and expectations that behave with a certain independence inside the psyche. When touched, the complex can temporarily take control of perception. You are no longer responding only to what is happening now. You are responding to everything the present moment resembles. This is why a quiet evening can suddenly fill with emotional intensity. Nothing visible has changed, but the absence of distraction allows the complex to activate. A forgotten rejection returns as certainty that you will be abandoned. An old humiliation appears as an imaginary argument. A childhood atmosphere of unpredictability returns as the inability to rest, even in safety. A man hears his partner say, "We can talk tomorrow." She says it gently and turns off the light. He lies awake, replaying her tone, searching for evidence of withdrawal. At 2 a.m, he drafts a long message, deletes it, then places the phone under his pillow, as if proximity could prevent loss. He believes he is reacting to one sentence. His body is reacting to every unanswered silence that came before it. What you have been calling irrational may be an old emotional system trying to protect you with outdated information. Silence also exposes the grief hidden inside adaptation. You have survived parts of your life by moving quickly. You adjusted before you had time to understand what the adjustment cost. You became competent because competence was necessary. You accepted disappointment because there was no room to collapse. You learned to say, "It is fine," because other people depended on you continuing. The psyche remembers the price of every adaptation, even when the conscious mind celebrates the result. Jung's work on individuation reveals a difficult truth. Development is not only the acquisition of new capacities, it is also an encounter with everything sacrificed to become the person you needed to be. Every identity has a cost. Every path closes other paths. Every survival strategy protects one part of you while abandoning another. When the world grows quiet, the abandoned parts begin asking to be acknowledged. A woman cleans a spare room after her adult child has moved away. She folds an old blanket and places it in a box. Her movements are efficient until she finds a small sock behind the radiator. She sits on the floor with it in her hand, not because the sock matters, but because 20 years of usefulness have ended without asking who she will be next. Her sadness is not ingratitude. It is the psyche grieving an identity that once gave her life structure. The heaviness that appears in quiet may not mean that you want your old life back. It may mean that you have never mourned the self who disappeared while living it. Your inner voice grows louder when your outer goals stop carrying meaning. Achievement can organize consciousness for a long time. A goal narrows attention. It gives suffering a direction. It allows you to tolerate uncertainty because you believe the future is leading somewhere. Yet a goal can remain psychologically useful after it has become spiritually empty. You keep moving because movement once saved you. Jung distinguished between the demands of the first half of life and those of the second, not as rigid age categories, but as different psychological tasks. Early development often requires building a place in the world. You establish competence, relationships, status, independence, and a workable identity. Later, the psyche asks a different question. Not how can you succeed, but whose life are you succeeding at? This question can arise at any age. It often appears after external progress has failed to produce the internal transformation you expected. You reach something you once wanted and feel relief for a week. Then the old emptiness returns. You set a larger target, assuming the problem was scale. The cycle repeats. A man receives the promotion he has pursued for 3 years. He shakes hands, accepts congratulations, and buys an expensive bottle of wine on the way home. Later, he stands in the kitchen without opening it. He looks at the label, places the bottle in a cupboard, and feels ashamed that victory has left him with nothing to feel. The emptiness is not proof that he is ungrateful. It is information about the limit of the goal. Your loss of excitement may be the psyche withdrawing its cooperation from an ambition that no longer belongs to you. The quieter your life becomes, the harder it is to avoid your contradictions. Conscious identity prefers coherence. You want to believe that your motives are clear, your values consistent, and your decisions rational. Yet the psyche is not organized like a public statement. You can love someone and resent them. You can desire freedom and fear the loneliness it brings. You can want recognition and despise your dependence on approval. You can forgive a person intellectually while remaining furious in the body. Jung did not view these contradictions as failures of character. He saw the tension of opposites as essential to psychological development. Individuation does not occur by choosing one side and eliminating the other. It occurs when consciousness becomes strong enough to hold the conflict without immediately escaping into certainty. Silence makes this tension visible. When the world is loud, you can attach yourself to a single position. You are right, and they are wrong. You are finished with the past. You do not care what anyone thinks. You are happy with your choice. Repetition turns these statements into defenses. In quiet, the excluded opposite begins to speak. A woman tells her friends that ending the relationship was the best decision she ever made. She means it. That night, she opens a drawer to find a charging cable and sees an old birthday card beneath it. She reads only the first line, returns it to the drawer, then becomes angry at herself for missing someone she would never choose again. Her grief does not cancel her decision. Her decision does not erase her grief. The conflict inside you may be painful, because both sides contain truth, and neither can be silenced without losing part of yourself. Your fantasies become more vivid when reality no longer absorbs all your attention. Fantasy is often treated as an escape from reality. Sometimes it is, but Jung also understood fantasy as one of the languages of the unconscious. Images, imagined conversations, sudden scenarios, and persistent daydreams can reveal psychic needs that have not yet found a conscious form. This does not mean every fantasy should be acted upon. It means every recurring fantasy deserves interpretation. You may imagine leaving everything behind, not because you literally need to disappear, but because your current life allows no psychological separation. You may fantasize about being admired, not because you are vain, but because your real efforts have remained unseen. You may imagine confrontation because your waking personality has refused anger. You may dream of rescue because you have organized your identity around never asking for help. The literal image is rarely the whole message. A man drives the same route home each evening and imagines continuing past his exit. In the fantasy, he does not have a destination. He simply keeps driving until no one knows where he is. At the usual turn, he signals, returns home, and immediately begins preparing dinner for everyone else. He does not necessarily want to abandon his family. He wants to experience one moment in which his existence is not organized around being needed. What you dismiss as escapism may be the psyche constructing a symbolic picture of a need you have refused to name. Your body often hears the unconscious before your mind does. You may wait for a clear thought to explain why something feels wrong, but psychic conflict frequently appears first through sensation, tightness in the chest, fatigue without obvious cause, a clenched jaw, shallow breathing, the inability to sit still, a sudden need to clean, eat, scroll, work, or leave the room. The body is not always delivering a hidden mystical truth. Physical symptoms can have many causes and deserve appropriate medical attention. Yet psychologically, the body can also register contradictions that consciousness has learned to ignore. Jung saw psyche and body as deeply connected expressions of the same life. When you repeatedly violate an inner boundary, suppress an emotional response, or remain inside a role that demands constant self-betrayal, the body may begin carrying the protest. Quiet removes the distractions that kept you from noticing. A woman arrives home after a social gathering and places her keys on the counter. The evening went well. No one insulted her. Nothing embarrassing occurred. Still, she notices that her stomach is tight and her breathing shallow. Only when she remembers laughing at a joke made at her expense does anger rise into language. Her body understood the boundary before her polite personality allowed her to know it had been crossed. The tension you feel in stillness may be the cost of maintaining peace at the expense of your own truth. The inner life grows loudest when a new identity is trying to form. You may assume that inner disturbance always means something is falling apart. Sometimes it means something is attempting to emerge. The difficulty is that psychological transformation rarely begins with a clear vision. It begins with dissatisfaction, disorientation, and the weakening of structures that once felt permanent. Jung called individuation a movement toward greater wholeness. Wholeness is not perfection, it is not permanent calm. It is the gradual inclusion of what consciousness has excluded, combined with a deeper relationship to the organizing center Jung called the self. The ego wants instructions. The self often begins by removing certainty. This is why transitions can feel empty before they feel meaningful. The old identity loses energy before the new one becomes visible. You no longer believe what you once believed, but you do not yet know what will replace it. You feel less willing to perform old roles, yet guilty for disappointing those who benefited from them. A man sits in his parked car outside the office where he has worked for 12 years. His hand rests on the door handle, but he does not open it. He is not planning to resign that day. He simply recognizes, with a clarity that has no practical solution, that the person who first entered that building no longer exists. The pause is not weakness. It is the moment consciousness notices that life has moved ahead of its identity. What you are calling confusion may be the interval between a self that has ended and a self that has not yet learned to speak. But there is a deeper cost beneath all of this, and it is the part you may still be trying to avoid. Hearing your inner life creates responsibility. As long as you can claim that you do not know what you feel, you do not have to change your relationship to it. As long as your exhaustion remains vague, you can keep calling it a busy season. As long as your resentment remains unnamed, you can continue presenting your compliance as love. As long as your longing remains a fantasy, you can avoid discovering what it would demand from you. Awareness removes innocence. Once you recognize that a role is erasing you, returning to it requires a more conscious betrayal. Once you see that a goal is empty, pursuing it becomes harder to justify. Once you admit that a relationship depends on your silence, every unspoken truth becomes a choice. This is why you may keep reaching for noise. Noise does not merely distract you from pain. It protects your current life from the consequences of insight. You may say that you want clarity, but clarity is expensive. It may require disappointing someone. It may require surrendering an identity that once earned love. It may require grieving years spent building a life that cannot carry you further. It may require accepting that no perfect explanation will prevent others from misunderstanding you. The unconscious does not promise comfort. It presses toward truth, and truth often destabilizes the arrangements built around its absence. Jung understood that the encounter with the shadow threatens the moral image the ego has created. You may discover that your kindness has contained fear. Your independence has contained wounded pride. Your patience has concealed paralysis. Your certainty has protected you from grief. This discovery can feel humiliating. It can also feel liberating, but not yet. First, it costs you the right to remain simple in your own eyes. A woman has spent years describing herself as easygoing. She avoids conflict, adapts quickly, and rarely asks for anything twice. In a quiet moment, after another canceled plan, she realizes she is not easygoing. She is afraid that having needs will make her unlovable. The insight does not immediately free her. It leaves her standing before a choice she can no longer pretend not to see. Your inner life may be loud because it is asking whether you are willing to lose the version of yourself that made your current life possible. There is no painless answer. You may lose approval when you stop explaining yourself. You may lose closeness when you stop carrying the entire relationship. You may lose certainty when you allow contradictory feelings to exist. You may lose momentum when you refuse goals that once protected you from emptiness. You may even lose the admiration attached to your suffering. Some identities survive because pain has become proof of goodness. You endure, therefore you are loyal. You overwork, therefore you are valuable. You accept less, therefore you are loving. You remain silent, therefore you are mature. When the psyche challenges these equations, it challenges more than behavior. It threatens the moral structure through which you have understood your worth. That is why quiet can feel dangerous. It gives you enough space to hear that your virtues may have been recruited into your self-abandonment. You do not need to force an answer from every thought that appears. You do not need to turn your inner life into another project of control. You do not need to analyze every dream, solve every contradiction, or make a dramatic decision simply because a feeling has become visible. You are allowed to listen without obeying immediately. You are allowed to remain near the question, long enough for its true shape to emerge. You are allowed to recognize anger without becoming cruel. You are allowed to admit longing without destroying your life. You are allowed to grieve an old identity without returning to it. Integration begins when you stop treating every unwanted feeling as an intruder. The unconscious is not asking you to surrender the steering wheel. It is asking for a place in the conversation. You can stop proving that you are fine simply because nothing is visibly wrong. You can stop calling yourself ungrateful because success did not satisfy you. You can stop treating your need for silence as a failure to participate in life. You can stop filling every empty space before you know what is trying to enter it. The world's quietness is not making you unstable. It is revealing how much effort was required to avoid your own depth. At the beginning, you may have believed that noise was stability, and silence was the threat. Now you can see the reversal. The noise kept your identity intact by keeping your inner contradictions unheard. The silence is not destroying you. It is introducing you to the life that continued beneath your performance. Your inner world feels louder because you are finally close enough to hear it. What rises in the quiet is not always a command, and it is not always the truth in final form. It is the psyche asking to become conscious. If this resonates, subscribe to The Waking Shadow, where we explore Jung's psychology for those walking the individuation path. Watch the video on your screen now to understand what happens when the old version of you no longer fits, but the new one has not yet arrived.